Chapter 4. Iulia Aurelia Zenobia. Love will not be constrained by mastery. When mastery comes, the god of love anon beateth his wings, and farewell he is gone. Love is a thing as any spirit free. Geoffrey Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales. The three men remained silent for a moment until Dan returned his attention to the royal appointment. There is no mention of Philipus ever marrying. Does that mean the family was not able to trace his progeny? He looked at Damianos. Perhaps it is important for you to remember, Dan, that Philipus probably married in his homeland of Syria and had descendants who carried the flag of the Ghassanids throughout his ages. Iulia Aurelia Zenobia, Empress of Palmyra, was such a person. Her ancestry is well described. She belonged to a family with Aramaic names. She herself claimed descent from the Seleucid line of the Cleopatras and the Ptolemies. Athanasius of Alexandria reported her as a Jewess follower of Paul of Samosata, which would explain her strained relationship with the rabbis at the time. And if you read the next paragraph in your book, I think you will find an answer to your question. Dan opened the book to the next page and read. It's accepted by scholars that the Palmyrene Emperor Lucius Septimus Odeaneus, the King of Kings of the Orient and husband of Empress Iulia Aurelia Zenobia, had a common ancestor with the Ghassanic king Jabala ibn al-Ayham. Does that mean that they were kissing cousins? Gustavo asked, a smirk coming across his lips. Returning the smile, Damianos said, Zenobia was born and raised in Palmyra, Syria. Her Roman name was Iulia Aurelia Zenobia. Latin and Greek writers referred to her as Zenobia, or as Septimia Zenobia. She became Septimia after marrying Septimius Odeaneus. He paused, crossed his arms over his chest, and frowned. You see, Dan, the historians are groping to find an answer as to Zenobia's real origin. Nevertheless, and once again, we can trust only what has been documented. Zenobia was a woman of great character and unparalleled intelligence. She was well educated, fluent in Greek, Aramaic, and Egyptian, with a working knowledge of Latin. She is supposed to have hosted literacy forums and to have surrounded herself with philosophers and poets, the most famous of these being Cassius Longinus. Maybe one of her better-known attributes was her beauty. She was said to be even more beautiful than Cleopatra. Differing, though, is her reputation for extreme chastity. Charles Morris, in his book Historical Tales Greek, wrote, Among the most famous of the women of ancient days must be named Zenobia, the celebrated queen of Palmyra and the East. Zenobia was most lovely as well as the most heroic of her sex, no woman of Asiatic birth ever having equalled her in striking evidence of valour and ability, and none surpassed her in beauty. Yet for me, Damianos went on, what remained my attention most of all was her fortitude and her unwavering will to win. The death of Lucius Septimus Odeaneus in 267 left Zenobia with only one choice, ruling over the empire her husband had built. By 269 the empress had expanded the empire, conquering Egypt and expelling the Roman prefect, Tenangio Probus, who was beheaded after he had led an attempt to recapture the territory. She ruled over Egypt until 274, when she was defeated and taken as a hostage to Rome by Emperor Aurelian. Following her capture, Aurelian, impressed by her beauty and dignity and out of a desire for clemency, freed Zenobia and gave her a villa in modern Tivoli, Italy. She is said to have married a Roman governor and senator, Marcellus Petrus Nutinus. They had several daughters whose names are not known, but who have supposedly married into Roman noble families. Zenobia is said to have had further descendants surviving into the 4th and 5th centuries. So I am to assume that one of her daughters was one who gave birth to another of my ancestors, is that right? Dan asked. Perhaps, Dan, yet families were not as rigid as we know them today. Although Odeaneus, the King of Kings, left no successor after the death of his son Verbalisus, it is not only possible but most probable that another branch of the Ghassanid clan gave birth to your ancestors. Remember, the Ghassanids still reside in Syria at this time, even after the Roman invasion. As the royal appointment states, the link resides with Nicephorus, Legothites dynasty. Good grief, I don't think I ever heard of so many Latin-sounding names in my life. Gustavo remarked. Who is this Nicephorus, then? Why don't you answer that question, Dan? Damianos said, fixing his gaze on him. Your book should tell you. Dan shook his head and turned the page. The daughter of Emperor Nicephorus I, Empress Procopia, wife of Emperor Michael I, Rangabe, had a son called Theophyflus, or Theophyfluk. He's the common ancestor that unites the Nicephorian Phosid dynasty and the Macedonian dynasty of the Byzantine Empire. It's accepted that Byzantine Emperor Nicephorus I descended from the last king of Ghassan. This assertion was even stronger, not merely citing the king Jabala as ancestor, but the Inopin of the royal Ghassanid dynasty using the name of King Japhna, the founder of the Ghassanid kingdom. Therefore, Emperor Nicephorus was not only citing his ascendancy, but by using the term Japhna, he was claiming to be the head of the Ghassanid dynasty. The Sikhs Shemor are the direct descendant of King Al-Harith Abu Shemor and King Jahala XI bin Al-Aham, and therefore related to Emperor Nicephorus I. "Oh wow," Dan exclaimed. "That's a solid lineage." "Exactly, Dan. The closer you get to your personal ancestry, the more you will find records of all relevant connections between the various families mentioned in the royal appointment." He paused and then asked, "Would you mind reading the next couple of pages for us?" "You mean there's more?" Dan looked down at the book. Suddenly the pages flipped rapidly, only to settle in the middle of the volume. Both Gustavo and Dan looked at the book and then at Damianos. "Did you do that?" Gustavo and Dan asked in unison. "No, not at all," the shepherd replied. "There is another hand at play here, Dan. Perhaps you should keep that fact in mind." "Okay, let's do this then," Dan said, before he started reading the account of his family's history. Garius is the name of Saint Gurias, the ascetic of Edessa, today's Ruha in Turkey, mast'ry who died in 305 AD. It is also the name of one of the most socially and economically prominent families in Lebanon, rooting back their ancestries to the sheikhs Shemor of Fahata, former Christian inhabitants of Akora and rulers of Gahata. Their religion is Maronite Christian, and they are direct legitimate descendants of the Christian Ghassanids. Their hometown is Chia, a predominantly Christian town located in the southern suburbs of the capital Beirut, bordered by Harat Hrik, Goberi, Hadath, and Then el Chibak. According to a historical book named The Sheikh Shemors, written by Father Agantius Howry, around 1950, the family Garius of Chia is formerly called Garius Habaki Shemor due to the village of Beit Habak in the region of Byblos. This Habaki family is issued from the prestigious Shemor family of Fahata Garta. The Shemors of Fahata have the title of sheikhs. They were the inhabitants of Kahora in the mountains of Byblos between 1211 and 1633, and the rulers of Garta Sigwaya between 1641 and 1747. At the beginning of the 18th century, some troubles occurred between the sheikhs Shemor and the Deha family. As a result, a member of the Shemors were compelled to flee the village and take refuge in a small, oversighted village in the uphill of Byblos, Beit Habak. He went there with his 4 sons and his unique daughter. The latter got married with the son of the concierge, although her family did not accept it. Her brothers killed her husband and were once again obliged to run away from the village. The first one went to the mountainous village of Baskinta, and because he was coming from Beit Habak, he was called Habaki, which with time became Aboika. The second one, Ferjane Shemor, had the courage to stay in Beit Habak. Today his offspring is known as the family Ferjane. The last 2 brothers, Fahat and Garius, went to the suburbs of Buret, where water is available and citrus trees are abundant. Fahat Shemor is today survived by a large family in Hadath, known as the family Fahat. Garius Shemor went to Chia in 1757. His son, Anton, took the name of his father as his family name, like his uncle's. Anton had 2 sons, Farius Garius, confirmed on 19th of April 1849, and Yusef, confirmed in 1852. "Is that the same Farius Garius that moved to Brazil then?" Dan asked. Damianos nodded. "Yes, and although he was not alone in travelling across the oceans, most of the Sikhs Shemor remained in Lebanon, and many of them are recognised today as prime political movers in the religion." "Does that mean I could travel to Lebanon today and find a descendant of the Garius and Ghassanid families?" "Yes, Dan. However, as you will see and experience very soon, in fact, your branch of the family planted roots in Italy even before the events of 1747. "When would that move have occurred then?" "At the time, the Chemos of Fahata were the inhabitants of Akora in the mountains of Byblos in and or around 1211. Your family, most descendant of the Ghassanid lineage, wanted to go to the heart of Christianity. Italy was the place to be if you wanted to be part of the Catholic Church's ascension to power." "Did we make it?" Damianos guffed. Obviously your family did, son, otherwise you would not be here. Besides, don't forget the Ricciullis earned their places in the annals of the church since they gave birth not only to one but two archbishops, one of them being most famous in his own right. So what happened to the sheiks Shamor? Gustavo inquired. As you said, they moved to Brazil, where some others stayed in the Middle East. But did anything remarkable happen to them before they migrated? Well, there was one of the Garrios who certainly made a name for himself. Dan and Gustavo exchanged a glance. Who was he? Dan asked. I think the end of the chapter will give you the answer, Damianos said, smiling at the two men. The father was one of the first Ghassanid kings around 500 AD. The son was the most prominent king of all the Ghassanids, and he was named the Great Protector, because he defended the Christians against the barbarians with the help and the benediction of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian II. His kingdom included the regions of Horan, Mount Hermon, the Golan, the Jordan Valley, and Damascus. In 635 AD, the Ghassanid kingdom disappeared after the Islam conquered the area. The Chaumar from Abu Chaumar Jabla had to flee to Lebanon. Their first stay was in the Christian Maronite region of Akora.